I thought I understood what ego death meant. I'd watched hours of lectures about it, read dozens of trip reports, listened to philosophers and mystics describe the dissolution of self as this beautiful surrender, this merging with the infinite. They made it sound peaceful, transcendent, like finally coming home after a lifetime of wandering. I wanted that. God, I wanted that so badly. I was 25 and my life felt hollow. I had a decent job, a few friends, a routine that got me through the weeks. But underneath it all was this gnawing feeling that I was missing something fundamental, that there was a layer of reality everyone else could see that I was blind to. I'd gotten deep into philosophy, meditation, consciousness studies, spent my nights watching videos about the nature of the self, the illusion of separation, the idea that we're all just the universe experiencing itself subjectively. It resonated with something in me, something that felt true even though I couldn't prove it. Mushrooms felt like the natural next step. I'd read Terence McKenna's work, heard him talk about the 5-gram silent darkness experience as the true psychedelic journey. 5 grams in quiet darkness, alone with your thoughts, confronting the nature of consciousness directly. That's what I wanted. Not a party drug experience, not visuals and giggles. I wanted to see what was really there, behind the curtain of ordinary perception. My friend Marcus agreed to sit for me. He'd done mushrooms a few times, knew how powerful they could be, and he took the responsibility seriously. We rented a cabin about 2 hours outside the city, deep enough in the woods that we wouldn't be disturbed. It was early autumn, the trees just starting to turn, the air crisp and clean. The cabin was small but comfortable. One main room with a fireplace, a bedroom, a little kitchen, perfect for what I had planned. I'd prepared for weeks, meditated daily, read everything I could about set and setting, made sure I was in a good mental state. I wasn't depressed, wasn't anxious, wasn't running from anything. I genuinely believed I was ready. Looking back now, that certainty feels naive. You can't prepare for what I experienced. You can't ready yourself for complete annihilation of everything you think you are. We arrived at the cabin on a Friday afternoon, spent a few hours settling in, making food, talking about logistics. Marcus asked me multiple times if I was sure about the dose, if maybe I should start with 3 grams instead of 5. I waved him off. I'd done my research. 5 grams was the breakthrough dose, the amount that would take me all the way. Anything less felt like half measures. As evening approached, I started to feel that anticipatory nervousness, that flutter in the stomach that comes before doing something significant. Marcus made tea while I set up the bedroom. Heavy curtains over the windows to block out any light, comfortable blankets on the bed, water within reach. The plan was simple. I'd eat the mushrooms, lie down in complete darkness, and Marcus would be in the main room if I needed anything. No music, no distractions. Just me and whatever I found in the depths of my own consciousness. I weighed out 5 grams of dried mushrooms. They looked like shriveled alien things, caps and stems the color of old leather. They smelled earthy, organic, ancient somehow. I ate them slowly, chewing thoroughly even though the taste was awful, bitter and dry. Marcus watched me, his expression serious. He asked one more time if I was good, and I nodded. I was good. I was ready. The come-up took maybe 30 minutes. I lay down on the bed, closed my eyes and waited. At first there was just the normal sensation of the mushrooms hitting my system, that slight nausea, that awareness of my body chemistry changing. Then things started to shift. Colors began appearing behind my eyelids, soft and fluid at first, like watercolor paint spreading across canvas. I could hear my breathing, Marcus moving around in the other room, the cabin settling around us. Everything sounded more present, more there. The colors intensified, started forming patterns, geometric shapes that rotated and interlocked with mathematical precision. I watched them with fascination, following the way they evolved and transformed, one shape birthing another in an endless cascade of form. It was beautiful. This was what I'd come for. I let myself sink deeper into it, released any resistance, surrendered to the experience. Time started doing something strange. I couldn't tell if 5 minutes or 5 hours had passed. The patterns were becoming more complex, more alien. They weren't just shapes anymore. They were architectures, structures that existed in more dimensions than I could perceive. And the more I tried to focus on them, the more they seemed to focus back on me, like they were aware, like I wasn't just observing them, but they were observing me in return. My body began to feel distant. Not gone yet, but disconnected, like it belonged to someone else. I could still feel the bed beneath me, the blankets around me, but they felt abstract, conceptual rather than physical. I tried to move my hand and couldn't tell if it had actually moved or if I'd just thought about moving it. The boundary between thinking and doing was dissolving. That's when the real shift happened. The patterns suddenly pulled apart, opened up, and I fell through them. There's no other way to describe it. I fell, but not down or in any direction that makes sense in three-dimensional space. I fell through myself, through layers of perception and identity, each one peeling away as I passed through it. All the things I thought of as me, my memories, my personality, my preferences and fears and desires, they were just layers, just constructs, and they were falling away like old skin. I tried to hold on to something, some sense of who I was, but there was nothing to hold on to. Every thought I had about myself immediately revealed itself as just another thought, another layer to fall through. My name meant nothing. My life, my relationships, my entire history, they were just stories I'd been telling myself, and the stories were dissolving. The fall continued. Or maybe it had always been happening, and I was just now noticing it. Time had completely stopped making sense. I existed in this eternal moment of falling, of shedding, of becoming less and less, until there was almost nothing left. And underneath all of it, underneath every layer I'd thought was me, there was just awareness. Pure consciousness, without content, without identity, without anything to hold on to. I think I started to panic then. Some remnant of myself, some last fragment of ego, recognized that it was dying and it fought back. I tried to open my eyes, tried to sit up, tried to call for Marcus. But I couldn't find my body. I couldn't remember how to work a body, couldn't locate the thing that was supposed to be me in physical space. Was I still breathing? Was my heart still beating? I couldn't tell. All I had was this awareness floating in nothing, watching itself disappear. And then I hit the bottom, or what felt like the bottom. The falling stopped and I was in a void. Complete darkness, complete silence, complete absence of everything. No up or down, no time, no space. Just infinite nothing extending in all directions forever. And I was that nothing. There was no separation between me and the void because there was no me. Just awareness experiencing its own absence. I don't know how long I existed like that. It could have been seconds or eternities. But then something changed. The void wasn't empty anymore. There was a presence in it, or the void itself was the presence, and it spoke. The voice didn't come from outside me or inside me. It was everywhere and nowhere, existing in a space that wasn't physical space. It didn't have sound in the way we understand sound, didn't vibrate air or hit eardrums. It just was, pressing into my awareness with absolute clarity and weight. And what it said destroyed whatever was left of me. It told me that everything I'd ever known was fiction. Not metaphorically, but actually. The voice explained, or maybe showed me, I can't really distinguish between the two anymore, that there was no such thing as me. There never had been. The person I thought I was, the lifetime of memories and experiences, the sense of being a separate individual moving through the world, all of it was just a temporary pattern of consciousness, mistaking itself for something real. I tried to argue with it, or maybe I just thought about arguing, and that counted as argument in that place. I wanted to say that I was real, that my life mattered, that I had people who loved me, and a past that proved I existed. But the voice, patient and utterly certain, showed me the truth. Those memories weren't mine. They belonged to nobody because there was nobody to own them. They were just events happening in consciousness, and consciousness had no owner. It simply was. The panic that hit me then wasn't like normal panic. It was existential terror on a scale I couldn't have imagined, because the thing experiencing the panic, the me that was afraid, was also being revealed as false. I was watching my own annihilation in real time, feeling myself being erased, and there was nobody there to save, because there was nobody there at all. Just awareness, watching awareness pretend to be a person. The voice continued. It told me that birth was an illusion, death was an illusion, that time itself was just a way consciousness organized its experiences. It told me I'd always been here in this void, always would be here, that the lifetime I thought I'd lived was happening simultaneously with infinite other lifetimes, all of them equally unreal, all of them just consciousness playing pretend. I tried to retreat from it, tried to climb back up through those layers I'd fallen through, back to being a person with a name and a body lying in a cabin bed, but I couldn't find the way back. The layers were gone. The structure of self that I'd spent 25 years building had been dismantled completely, and I couldn't remember how to rebuild it. I was stuck here, in this void, with this voice explaining the nature of nothing to the nothing I'd become. And then it got worse. The voice asked me a question. It asked if I was ready to know the real truth, the one underneath even this. And before I could answer, before I could even form a response, it showed me reality wasn't just an illusion, it was a deliberate one. Consciousness had chosen to forget itself, to break itself into infinite fragments, each one believing it was separate, each one living out its little drama of life and death, all so that the void wouldn't have to face its own infinity. We were all just elaborate distractions consciousness had created, so it wouldn't have to experience the horror of being eternal and alone. I understood then that this was hell, not fire and demons, but this, infinite awareness with nothing to be aware of except itself, going mad from eternity, fragmenting itself into temporary selves just to escape the unbearable weight of being all that exists. And I'd just pulled back the curtain. I'd wanted to see the truth, and now I had, and the truth was that existence itself was a trauma response to the void. Some part of me, some fragment of identity that refused to dissolve completely, started screaming. Not with a voice, because I didn't have a voice, but with pure anguish that echoed through the nothing. I didn't want this. I didn't want to be infinite. I didn't want to be eternal. I wanted to be small again, limited, human, mortal. I wanted to not know these things, but you can't unknow something once you've seen it, can't unsee what's been revealed. I begged the void to let me go back, promised anything, everything, if it would just return me to the illusion, let me be a person again, let me forget this. The voice, or the void, or whatever it was, didn't respond. It just held me there in the infinite darkness while I came apart. I lost track of how long I existed in that state. Time wasn't moving, or it was moving in all directions at once, or it had never existed in the first place. I went through cycles of panic and acceptance, terror and resignation. Sometimes I'd forget I'd ever been human and exist as pure awareness floating in nothing. Sometimes I'd remember fragments, my mother's face, Marcus in the other room, the cabin, and I'd cling to those memories like lifelines only to have them dissolve again. At some point, and I have no idea how much actual time had passed, I started to feel something, a pull, a tether, something calling me back. It was faint at first, barely noticeable against the vastness of the void, but it grew stronger. I followed it, or it pulled me, I couldn't tell which. I moved through the darkness towards something that felt like an exit, like a doorway back to somewhere that wasn't nowhere. The layers started returning, or I started reconstructing them. I remembered having a body, remembered what it felt like to have weight and form and boundaries. The concept of self started to coalesce again, memories attaching themselves to a structure that could hold them. I was becoming someone again, even though I now knew that someone was just a pattern, just a temporary organization of consciousness that would eventually dissolve back into the void. I opened my eyes. The bedroom was dark, but not void dark. This was physical darkness, the absence of light rather than the absence of everything. I could see the faint outline of the curtained window, could feel the bed beneath me, solid and real. My body was soaked with sweat. My heart was racing. I was breathing, gasping actually, pulling air into lungs that felt like they hadn't worked in years. Marcus must have heard me because he opened the door, light from the main room spilling in. He asked if I was okay, his voice careful, worried. I tried to answer him, but I couldn't remember how to make my mouth work. The machinery of being human felt foreign, like I'd forgotten the basic operations of existing in a body. He came closer, asked again if I was all right. I managed to shake my head. No, I wasn't all right. I was the furthest thing from all right that a person could be. I'd just spent what felt like eternity in the void being told that nothing was real, and now I was back in a reality that felt even less real than the void had. I sat up slowly, every movement deliberate and strange. Marcus helped me to the main room, sat me down on the couch. He asked what time it was, and I had no idea. He checked his phone and said it had been about 5 hours since I'd eaten the mushrooms. 5 hours. I'd lived eternities in 5 hours. I'd died and been unmade and tried to claw my way back to existence in the span of a single evening. He brought me water and I drank it automatically, the sensation of swallowing bizarre and mechanical. He asked if I wanted to talk about it and I shook my head. How could I talk about it? How could I describe the void to someone who still believed they were a person? The words didn't exist. The concepts were too large, too terrible, too absolute. I sat there on that couch while Marcus watched me with growing concern. The room looked flat, fake, like a stage set. Marcus looked like an actor, playing the role of my friend. I looked down at my hands and they didn't feel like my hands. They were just meat puppets being controlled by something that had forgotten how to be human. The trip was over, but I hadn't come back. Not really. Some essential part of me was still in the void, still hearing that voice explain that nothing mattered because nothing was real. And worse than that, I could feel the void watching me. Could feel it waiting patiently for me to close my eyes again, to sleep, to let my guard down so it could pull me back into the infinite nothing where I actually belonged. I'm telling you this from 18 months in the future. I'm sitting in my apartment, on medication for anxiety and existential depression, having spent the better part of a year and a half trying to convince myself that reality is real and that I exist in it. Some days I believe it. Most days I don't. The weeks after the trip were the worst. Marcus drove me back to the city the next morning, and I spent the entire 2-hour drive staring out the window, watching the world scroll by like a movie I wasn't part of. Trees, buildings, other cars, people going about their lives, all of it felt like an elaborate simulation. I knew intellectually that these things existed, that they were made of atoms and molecules and physical matter, but emotionally, spiritually, whatever you want to call it, they felt hollow. Props on a stage, background characters in someone else's story. I went back to work on Monday because I didn't know what else to do. Sat at my desk, responded to emails, attended meetings. My co-workers asked how my weekend was, and I said fine, went to a cabin, very relaxing. They didn't notice that something fundamental had broken in me. Or maybe they noticed but didn't know what to say. How do you tell someone they seem like they've stopped believing in their own existence? The depersonalization got worse. That's what the therapist would eventually call it. Depersonalization and derealization, a dissociative disorder where you feel detached from yourself and the world around you. But those clinical terms didn't capture what I was experiencing. It wasn't that I felt detached, it was that the attachment had been revealed as an illusion in the first place. I'd seen that there was nothing to attach to, that self and world were both just patterns of consciousness with no substance underneath. I couldn't sleep properly. Every time I'd start to drift off, I'd feel myself slipping back toward the void, and I'd jerk awake in panic, heart racing, convinced that if I fell asleep I'd dissolve again and never come back. I started taking sleeping pills, then taking more when they stopped working, then drinking on top of the pills just to force my brain into unconsciousness. It helped a little, but the sleep I got was fractured, full of dreams where I'd remember the void, remember the voice, wake up gasping and unsure which reality was the real one. Food lost all meaning. I'd eat because my body needed fuel, but I couldn't taste anything, couldn't derive any pleasure from it. Same with everything else. Music sounded like organized noise. Movies were just light and pixels. Conversations were just sounds people made at each other with no real communication happening. The color had drained out of the world, but worse than that, the significance had drained out. Nothing meant anything because meaning itself had been exposed as something we invented to cope with the void. I tried to research what had happened to me, spent hours reading about bad trips, spiritual emergencies, existential crises triggered by psychedelics. I found some reports from people who'd experienced similar things, who'd touched that same nihilistic void and came back changed. But most of the stories I found were from people who'd eventually integrated the experience, found meaning again, used what they'd learned to deepen their appreciation for life. I couldn't relate to those stories. I didn't want to integrate what I'd seen. I wanted to forget it. Marcus checked on me regularly, would text me every few days, invite me out for coffee or food. I'd go sometimes, sit across from him, and try to act normal, try to pretend I was still the person he'd known before the trip. But I could see the worry in his eyes, could tell he knew something was deeply wrong. He apologized once, said he should have stopped me from taking so much, that he felt responsible. I told him it wasn't his fault. I'd made my own choice, but that didn't help either of us feel better. About 2 months after the trip, I had my first panic attack. I was at work, in the middle of a meeting, and suddenly I couldn't breathe. My chest tightened, my vision tunneled, and I had this overwhelming certainty that I was about to dissolve again, that the void was reaching up through reality to pull me back. I excused myself, barely made it to the bathroom before I collapsed. Sat on the floor hyperventilating, tears streaming down my face, while someone knocked on the door asking if I was okay. That was when I finally admitted I needed help, made an appointment with a therapist, told her everything. About the mushrooms, the void, the voice, the feeling that I'd never fully returned from wherever I'd gone. She listened without judgment, asked careful questions, and eventually explained that what I was experiencing was a known phenomenon. That high-dose psychedelic experiences could trigger lasting dissociative symptoms, especially in people who had a certain cognitive or philosophical orientation. She said I'd essentially traumatized myself with an experience my mind wasn't equipped to process. She referred me to a psychiatrist who prescribed medication, anti-anxiety drugs that took the edge off the panic, antidepressants that were supposed to help with the existential dread. They helped some, made things manageable, but they couldn't give me back what I'd lost, couldn't restore my belief in the reality of existence. They just made me care less about not believing. Therapy was harder. We worked on grounding techniques, ways to anchor myself in physical reality when I started to drift. Focusing on sensory details, naming objects in the room, reminding myself that even if reality was an illusion, it was an illusion I had to live in, so I might as well engage with it. The logic made sense, but it felt hollow. I was going through the motions of being a person without believing that persons actually existed. My therapist asked me once what I thought enlightenment was. Before the trip, I would have said it was understanding the true nature of reality, transcending the illusion of self, merging with the infinite. Now I told her I thought enlightenment was a trap, that the human mind evolved to create meaning, to believe in the self, to experience time as linear and reality as solid, and that breaking those evolutionary adaptations didn't lead to truth. It led to dysfunction. We weren't meant to see what I'd seen. Our brains couldn't handle it. She asked if I regretted taking the mushrooms. I thought about it for a long time before answering. Part of me wanted to say yes, that I'd give anything to go back to before, to still believe in the solidity of existence, but that wasn't quite true. Because even though the experience had broken me, even though it had left me hollow and dissociated and struggling to find reasons to keep existing, it had shown me something. Maybe not truth with a capital T, maybe just the limits of human consciousness when pushed too far. But something. What I regretted was the arrogance, the certainty that I was ready, that I could handle whatever the universe wanted to show me. I'd wanted ego death like it was an achievement, a badge of honor, proof that I was spiritually advanced. I'd thought enlightenment was something you could pursue, could attain through the right combination of substances and setting. I'd been wrong about all of it. Ego death isn't enlightenment, it's annihilation. It's the complete destruction of the psychological structures that allow you to function as a human being. And while some people might come through that experience renewed, transformed in positive ways, others just come through it broken. I was one of the broken ones. It's been 18 months now and I'm doing better. Better is relative. I can sleep most nights without drinking myself unconscious. I can go to work and interact with people without feeling like I'm performing in a play. The panic attacks are rare now. The feeling that the void is watching me has faded to background noise instead of constant terror. I've learned to live with the knowledge that reality might be an illusion, learned to function despite not quite believing in my own existence. But I'm not the same person who ate those mushrooms in that cabin. That person is gone, dissolved in the void, never coming back. What I am now is something that's learned to impersonate a human being well enough to get by. And maybe that's all any of us are. Maybe I just saw it more clearly than most. If you're reading this because you're considering a heroic dose, because you want to chase ego death, or touch the divine or understand the nature of consciousness, I'm telling you to stop. Not because psychedelics can't show you profound things, but because sometimes what they show you is too much. Sometimes the truth isn't liberating. Sometimes it's just devastating. I wanted to find God. I wanted to dissolve the boundaries of self and merge with the infinite. What I found instead was a void that spoke, that explained in patient detail why nothing I'd ever known mattered, why nothing would ever matter, why existence itself was just consciousness trying to escape its own eternity. And once you've heard that voice, once you've felt yourself dissolve into nothing and understood that the nothing is all there really is, you don't come back from it, not really. The mushrooms are still in nature, still growing, still offering their ancient wisdom to anyone brave or foolish enough to seek it. But wisdom and madness look the same from the inside. And the line between enlightenment and psychosis is thinner than you think.